This is the Defenders podcast on TV Podcast Industries. We're back talking about Falcon and the Winter Soldier with Assembled, the Making of Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Isaiah is challenging Sam just on whether or not a black man should be Captain America. He has that line where they will never let a black man be Captain America, and even if they would, no self-respecting black man would ever want to be. We didn't want Isaiah to be wrong about that. That's going to be part of his ongoing struggle. He says, man, I know every time I pick the shield up, a portion of the world is going to hate me for it. Sam got to live with that as he goes off and tries to make this work.
I hear a lot of people saying the blues, but I'm going to tell you what the blues is. When you ain't got no money, you got the blues.
Welcome back, fellow Defenders. We're back talking about Falcon and Winter Soldier for the final time, talking about the full series and the making of Falcon and Winter Soldier. We're also going to be announcing the winner of our pub quiz and those wonderful Falcon and Winter Soldier goodies. I'm one of your hosts, Derek.
Hello there, fellow Defenders. I'm one of your other hosts, John.
And rounding out this trio of shield-bearing, wing-flying, and vibranium arm-bearing, I'm Chris.
Vibranium arm-bearing. I like it.
Yeah, because he is. He's bearing his own arm.
Absolutely. Chris mentioned just before we start recording, in case any of our fellow Defenders haven't seen this, Hot Toys, who are a premium figure sculptures or statues. Yeah. They've just released images of the new Captain America, Sam Wilson, in his Falcon suit, and their statue for that, about $400, I think it is. Go check out the images of it. It looks stunning. It looks very, very cool.
So poseable with all the extras, with the wings, the full suit, the visor. Like, it just looks...
With Red Wing and the shield as well.
Yeah.
They look really cool.
And just a Red Wing, not an army of Red Wings, because that would be so much cooler. A flock of Red Wings, if you will.
But we're here to close out our discussion on Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Really enjoyed the 6-episode season, as you know, if you were listening to our coverage of the 6-episode seasons. We're just going to really discuss the making of episode, which came out on Disney Plus this week, which talked about the behind the scenes and some of the creation of the show and what happened on it. Before we go into it, gentlemen, what did you think of the making of overall?
I really liked it, actually. I thought there were some really great aspects to it. I like the fact that, you know, they kind of confronted the whole COVID thing, but also there was some really good SFX information and the sort of production design information, which was really, really interesting. I mean, I'm always a bit of a sucker for those parts of making of.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought that Carrie Skoglund, she just seemed like a really great person to work with. I really liked her kind of interjecting throughout the episode and just giving the context, I guess. So I thought that was really, really good. I kind of really enjoyed this. I still don't necessarily think it's up there with, say, the Mandalorian making of, where you've got the void or the volume that they introduced, which, you know, was just so interesting.
Yeah.
But I just, you know, a lot of SFX stuff here around the fights, which are, was just really, really interesting. Like, so much SFX, than what I realized when watching it, just how photoreal they get it.
Yeah, we'll certainly talk about the detail of the making of. Chris, what did you think of it overall?
Overall, it was fine. I think that's kind of it wasn't great. It was good, fine, good. Like, it was in there. Couple of interesting things. I would have preferred a bit more focus on some elements, which we'll get into over others. I do. The key problem with these making ofs, and it's a fair problem. These are made in a vacuum. These are made and recorded and filmed and asked questions of back when they're producing, when they are making the film and the TV show, in this case. So they don't know the culture. In theory, they don't know the cultural relevant parts and the bits that are really going to kick off.
The impact. Absolutely.
The impact, exactly. So you either go whole hog and you try and get every possible angle and you end up with a load on the cutting floor, or you zero in on certain things and hope that those are the elements that really do ring true,
and
do have an impact when it airs. And I think that's going to be the overall question going forward.
Absolutely agree with you, Chris. And John, you mentioned, the high bar for Disney Plus really is that first season of The Making of the Mandalorian. It was an episode for each episode of the show, went into really good detail, had roundtable discussions with all the directors and writers of the show, chatting to each other about how they made the show. And I would assume that what happened was Disney looked at the viewership of this and said, we're not going to spend the time on doing a really in-depth dive into that because hardly anybody watches it. So we're going to do one episode. And it seems like they just cut the kind of the pure stuff, the kind of stuff that you would get small little clips of to promote the show, and turned it into an episode rather than having really in-depth discussions about what they did and what they accomplished. Whereas we did talk about in the WandaVision making of, there was a couple of things that they just didn't talk about at all. Here we did get a little bit more depth on the making of, I thought, than we saw in some of the WandaVision stuff.
I guess the problem for me is that it feels too polished for a making of it. I think back to the Lord of the Rings stuff where it was almost like a fly on the wall documentary. It's like they need to have someone who's not involved with the production just doing that stuff and then editing it. And I think it's either you do that thing or like with The Mandalorian where, it is polished, but it almost felt like a round table after they had finished and coming back to their experiences and cutting that with just fly on the wall footage that they had of shooting The Mandalorian. Yeah. And so for me, this, as you say, it just feels much more like a marketing thing, a cutting together of stuff that you would have, sort of in a DVD that isn't really quite as exciting as what you got with the Lord of the Rings. So it just feels too polished for me. It feels a bit like kind of just there for the sake of it in some respects, but it's still got some interesting stuff. For sure. And I think, as I say, anything around production design and SFX is just like really interesting for me.
Yeah. Well, let's get into some bullet points, some of the big kind of things that stood out to us from the making of episode. I think my first one that stood out to me really was the concept. I think Carrie Scoggin, the director who directed every episode, is the one that brought this up, where she says that the concept in here for the show is about the new hero. What is a new type of hero now? When Captain America originally was created back in the 40s, he is a character that is supposed to represent army and soldiers and those types of heroes. And now these days, after 9/11, after so many events that have gone on, the real heroes now are the first responders, the people that go in and help and save rather than attack and shoot effectively. So I thought that was a really interesting central through line for the story, of the kind of kickoff point for this story with Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Yeah,
it's a real interesting change in the perspective. And I think it's like spot on for me. I think, it almost feels like it requires that reflection. And that's kind of the thing you got from Carrie Scoggin all the way through this. And I think as well, from Malcolm Spellman in terms of the lead writer, you really got a sense that they were trying to just reimagine what a hero is and where people would make that connection to it for ordinary people. And that whole reflection of it I thought was really good.
I found it interesting when they started talking about the mantle of Captain America and what it meant, and essentially that you can't just pass the shield. It's beyond that, it's passing a mantle. And I was like, that's a way that I hadn't thought about, because they do bring into the comic books, and they're like, it's a known quantity that someone can pick up. They can be a different Batman under the cowl. They can be a different Captain America, but in a grounded reality, which they are making to a degree with, outside of Thanos and sorcery, in a grounded reality of the MCU, what they're trying, the realism. What does that mean? You can't, what does it mean to be the next Steve Rogers or Captain America? And I thought they succeeded with that. This storytelling, they did have us question and ask ourselves what it meant to carry that shield.
Yeah.
And more importantly, what it meant for Sam Wilson.
Absolutely, and this is what I do like about this type of documentary. Like you have, I think it's Zoe Nazelholt, the other co-executive producer, who mentions that in the comic books, you have Captain America dies, but he's going to be coming back in a few months' time, and maybe it'll be a different person called Captain America, and that's a really normal thing to do in publishing comic books, but it just wouldn't work on TV to have, or in the movies, it wouldn't work to just instantly have a new Captain America, because in comic books, it's the title that sells and people follow the storyline effectively. Whereas here they're saying, you really need to deliver a good storyline to get people onto this concept of having a character passing the mantle to somebody else. In comic books, they've gone back. I think it's 1,000 years. They have, old versions of characters like, Iron Fist that's been around for centuries. They have, all of these major characters that now are all titles that have been passed down through centuries effectively. Whereas you can't really do that without some big explanation in movies and TV shows. So I liked when they connected it to the comic books and showed what they had to do to transfer that to the cinematic universe.
Yeah, it's that realistic element of chain of succession. How does it get there? Who effectively anoints, like you have with John Walker, he was anointed by the US military, whereas effectively the ground up, the popular choice as such in inverted commas, the person that really deserves it is someone that hasn't been anointed in the form of Sam Wilson. Right. So it's a really interesting way to look at that succession. And I think, I think comics have looked at that, possibly in the more recent past, but certainly, this idea that you would just have, the next Captain America. It's the title rather than the person behind it. And I think increasingly we're looking at the people behind the mask as such.
And it is interesting. We've had the 6-episode series, which obviously we've all watched and it's been very successful. But technically speaking, if you were just a person that watched the movies, you saw Endgame and Sam Wilson walked away with the shield. The next movie that Sam Wilson's in, he's going to be this Captain America. And as an audience member, you're probably not going to question it too much now. Even if you haven't watched this show, you had that moment where Steve handed over the shield. We've now seen the struggle that it took for Sam to pick up that shield and become Captain America. But now they can drop him in a movie without having any of that explanation. It's all been taken care of now with this show. But an audience will accept that he just got the shield and became Captain America if they haven't seen the TV show. So I think that's quite an interesting little thing that they've done with this one.
Yeah. I think, look, we're going to be facing these questions. I think they are right to question it now because you have this with the upcoming next generation.
Yeah.
So I think this very much phase is going to be about phasing out, not phasing out, but the passing of the torch, the mantle. So we're going to get a new Hulk in the She-Hulk. We're going to get some form of new Iron Man or woman in the case of Ironheart and the Armor Wars. Yep. We're going to get a new Hawkeye. Like, there will be a new Black Widow. Like, this is all about passing the mantle so that they can continue these code names and legacies and people, but for the audience. Because, no offense, Chris Evans in another 20 years cannot be Captain America. Yes. Robert Downey Jr. in 10 years from now cannot be Iron Man. Now, and the reason I say this is I think there was a billboard put up for Iron Man. Bring back Robert Downey Jr. on his birthday. A billboard said, bring back Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, as Tony Stark.
Right.
And you're like, but no, yes, it's comic books, but at the same time, let's see what's next. Let's move this franchise forward. And I think that's very much what this was centered on, and that's where the making of even kind of jumps into it.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't see Robert Downey Jr. coming back at all. No. I know this is a complete aside, but I always find it really interesting that Iron Man 3 was the last movie that Robert Downey Jr. starred as Iron Man. Everything else has been him guesting in other movies, right? Yeah. So they haven't actually made an Iron Man movie for, how long is it now? Probably almost 10 years, right?
Yeah.
Or 8 or 9 years. He's been a guest star in all the other movies, and he's the main star, of course, but they're not Iron Man named movies. I think that's fascinating, considering he's such a big star of the entire series. He's probably the main star of the series, but he didn't get out Iron Man 4.
The next one will be very much Armor Wars, the TV show, which it's not even confirmed he's coming back for, John Cheadle is the main star.
Yeah.
And after that, there's Ironheart, where there is an actress already been chosen for Riri Williams, and more than likely there'll be some form of Iron Man, Robert Downey Jr. in that, where he'll get a bucket load of cash for his face turning up for 2 to 3 minutes in each of those, and that's it. So he's been, yeah. But anyway, let's go back to away from Iron Man, which is my favourite, back to your favourite, which is Captain America. And let's talk about Captain America and the Winter Soldier.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a couple of the things about the writing really that struck me in these discussions. A lot of it was, people just talking about being cast and working on the project. But I think the stuff you don't get normally just by watching the show is these discussions about the writing and how they came up with the concepts and stuff. I did like the other element of it where they were talking about this was the search for identity for the two major characters. That's why the two of these characters were in here. That Sam's story was about looking to the future, seeing his future, deciding what his identity was going to be now that he's no longer Falcon to the Captain America. What's his choice going to be? And then the other side of it, why Bucky's involved here, is that Bucky's looking about his past and how he can escape from that and become something else for the future. I thought that was a really good insight.
Yeah, that was really good. I thought Malcolm Spellman was fascinating. Just like how he thought things through. I mean, even just like the sort of jump off point for the whole series being the one line from Anthony Mackie or Sam Wilson in Endgame about, this shield feels like someone else's. And that ultimately was where this all began. Yeah. This idea that this was still Steve Rogers. It didn't belong to Sam Wilson. There was a lot of stuff around the shield, which, progresses as we move through the series with the whole story arcs with Isaiah Bradley, the complicated nature of what Steve Rogers was doing in handing that shield to Sam Wilson. So, I thought that was really fascinating. And I think the other big thing was just where, he says it's not a speech, but the conversation of Sam Wilson as Captain America with his new suit to the GRC members after he's brought Carly's body, and how Malcolm Spellman, he says that he called up Anthony Mackie to go through, line by line, that he was happy with what was being said and his input to what he would feel comfortable saying as a black man in the Captain America outfit. Yeah. I thought that was massively interesting and just fantastic kind of writer-actor collaboration going on between these two. I thought that was really good and really interesting, because it's such a significant piece of dialogue for this series. And I like how Malcolm Spellman just really understood that as he was writing it, and but understood the importance and implications for not only the character of Sam Wilson, but the actor that is Anthony Mackie.
I thought it was really interesting that it was echoed in what Anthony Mackie was saying in his interview, going, I'm so happy that Marvel haven't trusted me to become the next Captain America. They could have chosen somebody else. They're going to get backlash for it. And he was almost echoing exactly what the character of Sam Wilson is saying. So you can tell he had some collaboration on that as well. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to call out at this point. My God, I want to have a drink with Malcolm Spellman. Man, he just oozes cool, and he has a story for everything. Like, he worked on Empire for 15 episodes or more, so he's in that room. Like, he has just these amazing, cool stories of LA life, and you're just like, I want to talk to you.
Yeah, like that's one of the things, and let's kind of talk about this other bit that we hadn't. That we kind of complained about when we were talking about WandaVision, that they never talked about the real world creation of the show when the pandemic was going on. And just to your point about Malcolm Spellman being a really interesting person to hang around with, you mentioned earlier on, Carrie Scoglin, the director of the show, also seems really interesting. And she kind of explains that they really had to bond differently as a team working on this show because of having to work in the pandemic and all being completely, I suppose, crowded together to film this the show when the pandemic was going on. They actually traveled when everywhere was in lockdown and had to convince a government to allow them come over from a country that had a massive amount of COVID cases, to allow them to leave America, come over to their country, bringing with them hundreds of people that could possibly bring an infestation of a pandemic to their country. Well, and they kind of said everybody was on board and working together, and they've created this unit. And everybody always says on these kind of documentaries that we had a family, but you can kind of see it because you know how much the pandemic has pushed people closer together who've had to stay together. And it really feels different this time.
Well, that's it. I mean, they were describing it, and it felt like the production team was about to go through kind of the Moses Egyptian plagues that would hit their families, because I was like, I was waiting for them to say that it rained frogs, and all this, or all the livestock died or something like that, because not only was there a pandemic with this disease, but then they had a whole earthquake situation, because they were going to originally shoot a lot of the scenes in Puerto Rico, not in Prague, towards the end of, this felt like it was getting all the plagues, that were going to happen from biblical times. So, they had to deal with a lot. And
it's like, not only was there one earthquake and we went, oh, we'll go ahead. Then there was a second earthquake and we had to pull everybody out of Puerto Rico, and they had to cut that whole storyline from the show.
And all the work in terms of scouting and getting locations and I guess organizing for, an entire production crew to go to Puerto Rico, that all that work had to suddenly very rapidly shift to Prague. Mm-hmm. So really, that was fascinating.
Speaking of that point, so that was one of the points I wanted to talk about, which was Puerto Rico and Prague and that whole piece, because for me, I'm so interested because they talked about how the writers in the writer's room tweaked the storyline for this based on the pandemic, based on what they could and couldn't film. So I'm just not saying that what we got wasn't great. I'm just so curious to know what that other storyline was.
Absolutely.
Like what was in Puerto Rico as a storyline, and what it's that it's not that I'm not happy with what I got. It's that I'm curious about what we will never get. It's that morbid curiosity of what never will come.
It really is, but it's weird because the whole Riga, Latvia element of it, given Baron Zemo, felt natural. That actually felt right. Yeah. And I was wondering what the Puerto Rico side of it would be. Because that just felt natural that they would be in Eastern Europe, in the Baltics. And I was trying to think, as you say, well, what were they trying to, I guess it doesn't matter where Baron Zemo went. They went to Madripoor, but it felt like a nice little sort of close association. The fact that Sokovia is in Europe, and it kind of felt just like a natural part of what you would write. So, what they were going for in Puerto Rico would be interesting as well. Yeah,
because I was trying to pick up the breadcrumbs from what they were saying, and the executive producer was saying that some of the scenes they filmed in Atlanta needed to match with Puerto Rico, and then suddenly they needed to match them with Germany, and needed to match them with Prague, and needed to match them with the locations that they were going to be filming at, and kind of going, what did you film in Atlanta that was like Puerto Rico? What was it? Who was going there? Because the whole thing about the show, and we mentioned it on our coverage, is that it's like James Bond. It's traveling to many countries and many places in the world and trying to make the show feel much bigger than it is by going to different locations. So adding in Puerto Rico, which would be a very different type of place than the Eastern Bloc in Europe, would have added an extra layer of something to make it seem much bigger again, seem much more like James Bond. But the fact they didn't is really interesting.
Yeah, but then this is the wonderful world of SFX and production design. Like, I've found the whole creation of Madripoor really interesting, and hearing Carrie Skoglund and the production designer Raymond Chan they were really struggling about where they were going to locate, and they were having a chat in Atlanta, in one of the suburbs or outer suburbs of Atlanta in Georgia, and they just looked down this alleyway, and with a bit of dressing of this alleyway, and obviously then with the SFX being pulled in for the backdrop, they created a bit of Southeast Asia and Madripoor down this alley street in a suburb of Atlanta in Georgia. Yeah. And it was just like really just incredible seeing Raymond Chan, just this one location where you have the street and then they cut to the final shot that they used in the series, and you're like going, these people have so much imagination to be able to look at something and understand how they could dress it to make it feel authentic. Like, it's so good.
I think we're going to get back to Madripoor, but I think the missing storyline is refugee camps.
Yeah, I do.
I think that's what it was. I think it was too close to home, based on some things that were happening. But just because of what that end, speech talked about the camps, the camps were brought up by the GRC and stuff like that. My gut tells me there was something, like there was a refugee camp of people trying to get back into the United States in Puerto Rico. And that was what that storyline was going to be. Potentially.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Anyway.
Like I noticed in the feedback we talked about from our awesome fellow defenders was pointing out that there was a storyline about a virus that was hitting the refugees, which had been cut from the show. So the refugees probably would have played a bigger role. We did see obviously where Carly and her team of Flag Smashers, where they all lived, which was effectively a refugee camp where everybody had been pushed there and there was a school for the kids and all that kind of stuff. We did see that as the example, but you probably would have seen more of that. And that's probably right. That would have been in Puerto Rico. Yeah.
I think interestingly for me, I kind of agree with you, Chris, that it's around the refugees, but actually by having or being forced to move it to Europe, it felt like they were also undermining a trope of where a refugee situation would be, in a sense that it was, it was in the middle of a very wealthy part of the world in Europe, and that the blip happened there as well, and there were those issues there as well, rather than, Central Latin America or wherever, that's where the refugee problem is. So it felt like it helped to undermine a trope. But I mean, that's if it is that. But I was thinking along those kind of same lines as well.
Agreed. So back to Madripoor.
Yeah.
And the SFX, because the set dressing and all this is amazing. From a location perspective, this for me was just awe-inspiring. Like the bit I found so even more interesting was when they were doing and filming some of the pieces, they went, oh no, this runway this highway does not look enough like Germany. So we're going to have to completely redo our, and film and then make it look like Germany. And I'm like, no one else, that's a level of detail that no one else would have got. So, the bridge he was talking about South Africa. And he was like, they had to blanket out some of in SFX, they had to blanket out some of the other kind of sky rises to make it look like, it's a level of, you feel sorry for the SFX guys and the visual effects guys at the end, because they're like, no, we can do it. And then you're thinking about every shot, they had to go in and pretty much hand paint away paintings and drawings. And it's like, oh no, we don't want that background. Now we want German landscape with some Alps and some mountains. Oh, and they have to be German trees. They even put in German trees. I was
it does feel like from the footage that they had of that scene specifically, the highway scene, it looks like they had a complete. They show you the original footage, then they show you a completed version, which doesn't look enough like Germany, which is changed completely again to look like Germany. It looks like someone worked for absolutely months and they got it in and went, no, can we change all the trees there and stick in a mountain? It does look like somebody spent months working on this.
And I was thinking, when they were saying that and it was that aerial view of the road, I thought, there's way too many road repair patches on that to be a German highway. That does kind of look like what I remember some of those roads in the US when we were going down to Carolina. It was it's definitely not Germany with those potholes and those repair patches.
Yeah, what I suppose one other thing on the production design for Madripoor, I really liked Raymond Chan, as you kind of mentioned about the railway line that's there, but I love that was in the back of his mind. He was thinking of how horrible it must be to live directly across the road from a railway station where everything's going through, and in the back of his mind he's like going, that sounds like something we should put into Madripoor. It's such a really creative guy, and he's such a really interesting guy when he talks about it. I'd love to have had a full episode about his production design and what he came up with for the show. He talks about the bar and getting ordering 3 monkey heads off the internet, then getting hundreds of them. Skulls. Sorry, skulls, not heads. That's right.
Even so, I didn't think they were things you would necessarily be able to buy online. But hey, there we go.
But then getting hundreds of them 3D printed to make this thing in the bar, this reference to a bar from the comic books, you know. So I thought that was really interesting. But again, it's just the detail and depth that's going on in the show. I thought it was really good to have the production designer there talking about it.
Agreed. And then one bit I did want to touch on, it's not actually in our notes, but it's one piece, the costume designs.
Mm-hmm.
That they did go into this to a level that I did not think about before. Like and surprisingly, Andrew Park, who leads the concept art for Marvel Studios. He, like, if you don't follow him on Twitter or Instagram, do. Mm-hmm. He's absolutely amazing. And following the shows, he'll post on Instagram and Twitter the actual concept art for these characters. Mm-hmm. And they actually call it out in this. Like, the concept art that he drew for Baron Zemo back in the day for Civil War was what they used to pull for the costume design in this. Yeah. Which is amazing. And then they got into, like, the Captain America suit. And then it's interesting to see that I found it hilarious. We talked about how the cowl was weird. In that last episode, we did say we were like, yeah, it looked great, but then they're bulky and stuff. They smoothed it down in SFX in post-production. They had to get rid of because the way that the cowl, his head turned, the fabric would bulge out. So when we were watching the speech, the first time they started showing the speech, they showed it was obviously post-production. So they had the bump, and I was like, did it always look that bad? Because it straight away caught my eye. This big, massive bulge on his neck. And then they showed it at the end of what they had done. I'm like, holy moly. Like,
I'm telling you, if I was in that meeting, that would be me handing in my notice on doing the special effects for this show. Yeah. Where it's like, we've decided that what we're going to do is make the mask this way because it looks really cool on paper. Can you just fix that in post? Yeah. Because what's the production designer says, there's no material like that in the world that would always cling to someone's face like that. It would it's basically like cling film wrapped around them. So we just got the guys in special effects to go over every single moment of that 12-minute speech that Anthony Mackie's doing and fix the mask every time he turns his head. Like, that is unbelievable. The amount of special effects work we have, that is one of the things to talk about, but the amount of special effects work that is in this show that you would not see, that you can't see. There's a point where there's so much stuff being rubbed out in the background and replaced, and everything going on in the foreground being replaced, and the characters' faces being put on other people's faces, where you're going, why did they just animate this show?
Yeah. Well, that's it. I mean, the level of SFX is incredible. like with the neck and the headpiece of the new Captain America suit, and the fact that we just mentioned, do the German landscape behind the trucks, but also even just the fighting on the trucks, and you saw how they did Anthony Mackie sort of doing the wire work and then fitting it into that truck scene with so many moving parts, as well as the helicopter scene. The thing with the helicopter scene was, I really like the fact that they did chuck a load of people out of a plane for an entire day with the squirrels in their wingsuits. Yeah.
We just have to be careful.
To get all that footage
from that first episode.
Yeah, from that first episode. And they managed to use some of it at least.
Well, it was even the line that these were real these were real wingsuit, experts. And so the footage of them is real things they can do. So maybe it wasn't the exact footage of them, but it's things that they do. They go canyoning in wingsuits, which is quite phenomenal.
Scary
and
as well,
scary as heck. Is there anything else about the making of documentary you guys want to talk about, Chris?
Yeah, one drop line, that the canyon scene from the first episode was always going to be in it, but it moved around in the story. I was like, what? Like, how does that work? It's like, how do you move this fantastic... And again, I suppose we now know why it opened, but it was just this, that they were like, we really want to do this. Let's move around in the story until we get it. And I'm like, but where... It boggled my mind. Again, it was just like, where else would it have fit? Like, that storyline was just like, I was like, no, that just didn't make sense to me. But anyway, I found it interesting.
Yeah. They were saying that they had the idea for that massive action scene for 8 or 9 months, just working it out, and then they said we're going to open the show with that. Yeah, but they could have had. I suppose he's chasing down Batroc. You could have had that later in the season as the chase down at Batroc, but you would of course have to change some of the lines on it. Of course, yeah. Anything else from you, John, that you want to talk about?
No, I just, the only other thing to add really from my side was just, I like the way they went through the characters. There's a real good bit here, with, Daniel Bruhl, again, how they wanted to keep that complexity of the character. And I guess that kind of chameleon-like quality of him, and the idea that, his basis in Civil War was one that actually people could understand and maintain that. So I thought that was really good, but it's also just that, they take, Sharon Carter, they've got the Countessa in there as well as doing the main beats with Sam Wilson and with Bucky Barnes.
Yeah.
So, that is another nice little element, that kind of is in the first half of this, episode as well.
I was sure when you said you wanted to talk about Daniel Bruhl, you were going to talk about his Suscovia commercial.
So, where is that?
Which is hilarious.
Where is that?
That was just a joke they did on set to show off the costume, which I
hope so, but I really want to see that now in actual with kind of fake star graphics, that kind of come to Sokovia, we have your suits for $9.99.
I want the Baron Zemo pajamas. I think that would be pretty cool.
Excellent. One
final bit from me is just that they did touch on the race aspect of this as a storyline, and I think while I was happy they touched on it, I didn't feel they gave it enough of a spotlight. I think it felt like it was about 7 minutes of the overall hour. And I think I personally would have liked to have seen more on that. And again, this is what we talked about earlier. I talked about where they may not have known it was there's no way they could know the future. If they knew the future, it would be amazing. But essentially, when they were writing this and they were filming this, the BLM and things like that had happened. We see Anthony Mackie talk about the protests and things like that. They just probably didn't know as far down the line as when this was airing how impactful it would be in the current climate of politics around the world, in the US, etc. I would have liked to seen maybe a pickup or two from Anthony Mackie, from the writer, from Carrie, from Sebastian Stan, from the actor who played Isaiah Bradley. You could have done a pickup there where they could talk about, because in interviews currently when they have been doing press for this, they've talked about the additional aspects of what it meant. And I'm like, no, I would have liked to see, because Andy Mackie got emotional talking about this on set, where you could see him start talking about when he talked about Breonna Taylor and things like that. Yeah. So that was for me the only bit. I was like, I would have liked to see another 5 minutes of just them posthumously looking at this as a piece. Yeah. Anyway.
But I think that's overall the challenge with these Marvel documentaries for the making of the shows is that, as you say, they're filmed at the time on set after they've read the script. There's no idea of how this will hit. Like if the show fails, if it comes out and nobody watches it and there's no cultural impact, you still get the same documentary as you do if it comes out and does great guns and is massively impactful to the culture. You get exactly the same documentary. So there's no looking back on it, which is a shame, because a lot of documentaries that we all enjoy watching are things like, here's the last 10 years of Marvel movies. Here's the impact on the world. Here's us looking back on the time when we did this, whereas they have no distance from what they've actually filmed and what they've actually written to be able to give it that extra context. But I think overall though, Chris, I think you're right. For every part of this, there's another story to tell for everybody. If we had an episode per episode of the series, or an episode based in production design and costume design, and music is one that I thought was a real shame they missed out. There was no mention of that at all. There was a whole section in WandaVision about the music for that show, but we got nothing here about the music for this show, which I thought was a bit of a letdown. I'd love to have had some discussion on the music for this show.
Yeah, no, and we got instead the stunt, the action. We got that discussion point where they talked about the previs and the running of the choreography for the fights and things like that instead. So I suppose, it's always going to be the give and take, the push and pull of this documentary for every MCU show that we cover. It's going to be, it's not an episode per episode breakdown, and it's not a deep dive. It's an hour long. So it's that hour versus 6 hours documentary.
Yeah, and they have to guess at what's going to hit. Like, as we mentioned about the WandaVision documentary, where they didn't really have anything on Agatha all along, which became this massive hit, where they didn't talk about it at all, really. They just had a little moment.
But they had the music.
Yeah, but they had a little moment in the documentary, rather than what you would expect going, if after the fact you'd be going, look at the cultural impact of the song and talking about it in real detail.
Yeah.
They don't, in the same way, Chris, they do have the discussion about racism in this show, because they knew exactly what they were making. They knew the point of view they were coming from, but they don't talk about the actual impact and how that landed with the audience, because they filmed this 5 months ago. So,
yes, exactly.
One other thing I just wanted to talk about really quickly was just Julie Louis-Dreyfus. I absolutely loved her reaction to why she took the role, because basically it was, I read the name, they had me, for the Contessa, which I thought was hilarious. I loved that she was so up for it, and really loved the idea of playing this completely duplicitous character that she didn't even know, is this person good or bad? I love that idea that's why she jumped on board. I thought that was a fun little moment.
She does call herself the alternative Nick Fury.
Yes, she
did.
Yep. So that is interesting.
But that's
she
what
is
I
forming.
said, Chris.
I know she is forming her own Avengers.
Yeah, exactly.
This is, and that's confirmed now, gents. That's it.
Yes.
Basically, that is.
Sounds like it. Definitely.
It does sound. So when we see her if rumors are true and she is in Black Widow, that will be it. That will be the deciding factor. If she basically, as a post credit, she is there getting Scarlett Johansson's or Natasha Romanoff's sister as a different Black Widow. That is it. Then we are getting the alternative, the Dark Avengers.
Or, let's call it the New Avengers.
All new, all spectacular.
Exactly. I would love if they literally just filmed this scene almost exactly the same way as Samuel L. Jackson talking to Robert Downey Jr. And it's just Julie Louis-Dreyfus in there. That'd be great fun. Guys, I think that's it overall for the discussion about the Making of documentary.
Yes.
John, do you defend the Making of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier?
Yeah, I mean, I do defend the Making of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, the Assemble. I think it's a nice little insight in the, I think, it would always be around a 3 for me, because I think they could do it better. But I think it's just the way it's made and produced, and okay, that's fine. But there's some really good stuff in here around production and SFX and the characters, and of course, the writing. It's a shame they didn't have stuff on the music, just, I guess, cause we lent into that quite a lot on the podcast. So, and it was within the WandaVision, because they had the different types of themes.
Yeah.
But still, that change in that iconic Captain America tune, with both John Walker and with Sam Wilson taking on that mantle in effect, and the subtle changes to that theme. It would have been interesting to get that discussion as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. How about yourself, Chris? Do you defend the Making of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier?
I'm very much like John. I'm a hot meh. It was good.
Yeah.
Yes, I am calling my co-host a hot meh.
Yes.
Sorry,
I just gave it 3. I didn't even give it, what was it? It'd be, I guess it would be 3 SFX overload out of 5.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a good one. That's a good one.
Replacement German trees? No?
Oh, yeah, 3 replacement German trees out of 5. There we go.
Much better.
That is much better.
It's an interesting watch. If you have a spare hour, like, stick it on. If you like, it's not, you do not need to watch this now. This is not a mind-blowing, like, secret uncovering documentary where you will come out better for it. It's just an interesting watch where you will learn a bit more. There are some nuggets in there. That's about it. So yeah, it's a hard good.
It's fine. It's fine. Yeah, absolutely. I'd be the same as you guys. You know, that it's a DVD extra put on Disney Plus. Effectively, I always watch these when we get DVDs. I'll watch them and then probably never watch them a second time, unless they're massively interesting, like the Lord of the Rings documentary, which I've watched multiple times because it feels like a documentary on how they built this entire universe. I hope Marvel at some stage in the future will combine all of this stuff together and have a big documentary on how Marvel Studios has pulled all of this stuff together. It may not be show by show or movie by movie, but I wish they went really in depth, because they clearly have people on set filming everything and taking photographs behind the scenes. So they probably have the footage. They just need the right documentary person to turn it into a real documentary about how the sausage is made. Isn't that the term?
Yes.
Sausage.
Right, that's it for our discussion about the Making of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. We need to go on to the reason why our wonderful defenders are really here. Let's go on to the pub, John.
Yes. Fellow quizzers, fellow defenders, I hope you have got a tipple of your choice, alcoholic or non-alcoholic, whatever floats your boat, for the pub quiz answers and the prizes. Yes. Mm-hmm. We got loads of entries in. Thank you so much for all the answers flooding into feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com. Great to get your input. And of course, we have the 3 Funko Pops of Falcon, Winter Soldier, and Baron Zemo. So, episode 1, question 1. First question. Including Batroc, how many flying squirrel parachutists jump out of the plane with their hostage, Captain Vassant? The answer to that was 5. Yes, 5.
Excellent. That's a really complicated question that you asked there.
It was. It's a quiz.
I like it. Chris, question 2.
Yes, for episode 2, we asked, in what year did Isaiah Bradley and the Winter Soldier first meet? The answer, of course, was 1951.
Yes, very good, very good. For episode 3, the question was, what is the 3-R motto of the Global Repatriation Council? And the answer was reset, restore, and rebuild.
I really want to use that in real life. I'm going to find a way to use those 3 R's.
If somebody asks you how to fix their computer, you can go reset, restore, and then rebuild.
Yeah.
It's the new turn it off and on again.
And I guess if it was an equation, it would be reset plus restore plus rebuild equals refugees. It would be given the GRC and what happened, yes, and the series. But for episode 4, we asked, what is the final trigger word or phrase in the Winter Soldier's activation protocol?
Yes.
And that answer was freight car.
Yes, but we did give it to our wonderful defenders who just said car, because technically they are correct.
Yes.
The last word is car.
Yeah, that's true.
But freight car is the phrase. We also had one of our wonderful defenders who gave us the Russian for freight car in an answer. Dr.
Excellent.
Bob Phillips.
Can you say it?
I cannot, because I haven't got it in front of me. But I did notice that Dr. Bob Phillips gave us the Russian for it as
interesting.
On screen. So very good.
In Russia, we don't take the train, we take the freight car.
That's not staying in the episode, Chris.
Oh, no. In Mother Russia, the train rides you.
I'm sorry, your Australian accent is not staying in the episode.
For episode 5, we had the question, what is the name of Sarah's fishing trawler that Sam and Bucky are repairing? Of course, it was their parents' name. It was Paul and Darlene.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the final question for episode 6, it was, what was the main chemical component or ingredient in the chemical device used on a flag smasher by Sharon Carter in the car park basement of the GRC? Sounds a little bit like a Cluedo question, John.
It was.
The answer for that is mercury vapor, amongst other things.
Yes.
And it is face-meltingly good.
Yes. It was a murder. It was a Cluedo question.
It was. We have gone through all of the questions, all the answers received, and we have got 11 entrants with all the correct answers. Well done to everybody's entered. But there are 11 people in for the chance to win the Funko Pops of Falcon Winter Soldier Funko Pops. Chris, do you want to ask Google for a number between 1 and 11?
Sure. Hey Google, randomly pick me a number between 1 and 11. 8. 2 fat ladies, 8. Well, in this case, 1 fat lady, 8.
Thank you for that, Chris, as our announcer on the electronic bingo call. It is a big congratulations to Adrian Johnson, who got all the questions correct there, and the 3 Funko Pops will be winging its way to you. We will be in touch to get your mailing details so that we can send those over. But it is a big congratulations to Adrian Johnson. Absolutely. And a big thank you to everyone participating in the pub quiz. It has been a really good amount of responses to the questions.
Absolutely.
And of course, there can only be one that gets the gold medal.
Yeah, even to those who didn't guess the goodies there, we hope you enjoyed at least following along with the pub quiz. I know we had a lot of great feedback about the pub quiz as a bit of fun listening along. So thanks so much to everybody who's entered.
Yes, gentlemen, it's about time we move on to our feedback section. But before we do, I just want to do a quick shout out to all our Patreons. Yes, we obviously do have a Patreon because this is a hobby for us. We have day jobs and we love to keep the lights running. And our illustrious editor-in-chief, our producer in caffeine, as he does do a fair few early morning edits and late night edits. So your support for even just $1 bill or €1 or £1 or a crone is amazing. Yes, anything you can support us with is fantastic. So head on over to patreon.com/TV Podcast Industries, where you will get our illustrious and heartfelt thanks.
Yes, thanks so much to everybody who's been supporting us on Patreon, and those of you who've bought me a coffee over on buymeacoffee.com/TVPI. Very nice of you. Thanks so much. Let's get into our feedback section. And once again, we start off with our all-new correction corner. Steve Brown got in contact with us to point out that the news report in the last episode said the explosion killed 4 flag smashers, meaning there are actually no more flag smashers out there. All 8 of them have been accounted for in the series. We had thought that the smasher pilot that went into the Hudson wasn't with the other flag smashers in that scene. It's actually on screen. There's only 3 of them in the back of the van, but the news report afterwards confirms 4 dead. So all 8 of the flag smashers are gone. So while it wasn't on screen and not filmed, they cleared it up in dialogue effectively.
Thank you for that. If it haven't been on screen, because we saw 3 in there and they say 4, could have been the guard body. I think if you do not see someone die on screen, there's a potential that they can come back. Also, comics. Everyone can come back from the dead. Absolutely.
But thanks so much for pointing that out. That's why we have Correction Corner. Thanks so much for that, Steve.
Thank you very much, Steve.
We also, in her entry for the pub quiz, Chloe got in contact with us saying, just a comment on our last podcast saying, I thought that was interesting what you said about Sharon being a Skrull. So does that mean Mephisto could be a Skrull? I think that was our confusion, Chloe. I think we may have confused you in what we were saying about Sharon being a Skrull, and our joke that Mephisto could be somewhere in the MCU already in hiding. So sorry about the confusion.
Yes, sorry about that. But no, Mephisto is demon, Skrull is alien.
And Skrulls are the only ones we've actually seen on screen because we saw them in Captain Marvel.
So far.
Exactly. Our next email comes in from 084. 084 says, hey guys, just wanted to drop in and say how much I've enjoyed the first and maybe only season of this show. It's a genius stretch of character development in my mind. If you decide only to watch the movies, you see Steve give Sam the shield, and then years later comes Captain America 4 and Sam in a cool new suit. And if you're like us and want to see Sam struggle to accept that mantle and everything that it meant, here it is. It's a terrific way to make these Disney Plus shows connect enough to make sense and go deeper into character, but almost be a detachable part of the MCU, which is a terribly hard task for Marvel Studios. There's much more I want to say, but if I only had to pick one more thing, it's to make a case for the character work of Carly and the Flag Smashers. Dibs on the band name. These people had been victims of extreme nationalism their entire lives up until the snap, and just when it seemed like they were finally accepted when these nations needed them, everybody blipped back and suddenly those shrinking fences shot back up even taller than before. And while Carly is a product of this deeply flawed system of nationalism, in comes John Walker, who is a shameless personification of it. It's not really a stretch to see how one is more sympathetic antagonist than the other. And this was all laid out pretty clearly by Sam in episode 4, so people complaining about our hands not being held enough don't really have an argument. I think this show, more than any, has shown me that sometimes if you don't care about a plot line, it's not always the show's fault. Can't wait for the follow-up movie and for MODOK and Loki coming out soon. Until next time, 084.
Wow. Thank you, 084. That, I did not think about it like that. And I sometimes try and pride myself on going deep on these shows, and I did not think about that element of it. Interesting.
Thanks so much at 084. Yeah, I'm the same. I think it is a really great kind of summation of Carly and the Flag Smashers and John Walker, and what that whole arc over the 6 episodes is. And I think as you say, there is always an audience involved. This is in that sense, a very interactive. And if you don't want to look into that plot line, then yeah, it's not always the show's fault. It's a really interesting point of view to come from, and I'm one that I definitely agree with. Yeah. And yes, Loki and MODOK, can't wait.
Yes, coming very soon.
We also got some email from Jerry who went, "Hey guys, the behind the scenes special sheds a lot on how COVID affected the production of the show. The attention to detail in the script about the discussion of race and the history of the struggle of Black Americans. It saddens me to see comments made by Comicsgate people and ignorant Americans that say Captain America cannot be a person of colour. I'm excited to see what Anthony Mackie will do with this character. In the special, Anthony Mackie realises the responsibility of playing this character and what it means to other people of colour to see this. Also, Daniel Bruhl's Zemo Sokovia commercial is priceless. Can't wait for Loki. Jerry in Niceville." Thanks for that, Jerry. And yeah, I think that's one of the things that has definitely come up a lot throughout this show. But additionally, beyond that, I would also say Anthony Mackie, the discussion he has about the pride that his kids will have in being able to see a person of colour be Captain America, that their father is Captain America, is going to be fantastic. He really does now exemplify what it means to be Captain America, or a Captain America. And I'm so happy to see where he and what he does with this character.
Yeah, it's really interesting that as well, Jerry, and totally agree with you. I thought not only about, his children seeing, their father playing this role, but there was a real nice moment where Anthony Mackie says about Marvel entrusting him with Captain America. Yeah. But, and I think he made a really fair point from his own personal perspective about, and the hard work that I've done for them to realize that they can do that. Let's not forget, he's put in the hard work, as he said in the show. Yeah. And he's just done so well, to bring, that transition of Falcon, this relationship with Steve Rogers, but also now coming into this series on his own, personally for Anthony Mackie. And I thought that was a real nice point that he made in his interview.
Yeah, the scene where Uncle Sam's nephews are touching the shield, is one of the most poignant moments in the MCU. Yeah, just seeing that nephew touch the shield, outline the star with his finger, and then look up at Uncle Sam. Yeah. Just, so chef's kiss.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah.
So good.
Thanks so much, Jerry. Over on our Facebook group, we also got some more feedback. Deanna Maskell says, Thinking about Falcon and the Winter Soldier as Sam's journey from the moment Steve gave him the shield until his full acceptance of it has helped me resolve my dissatisfaction with the final title card, including Winter Soldier, when Bucky is so clearly not that anymore. Watching Assembled and listening to them talk about Sam's journey makes me so eager to see where they take Bucky's journey to his new identity. Gotta love the Marvel long game. Also, I absolutely love that the Dora Milaje stay in contact off screen. Yeah,
that was really funny, wasn't it? Where the actress who plays Oya was saying that they've kept in contact from the time they filmed Black Panther. They're always in contact with each other. They have their own WhatsApp group, effectively. To keep in contact with each other. Really cool. So they see each other all the time. That was really funny.
Yeah, really cool. And for me, I'm eager to see where they take Bucky as well. And I really hope it's in the White Wolf direction.
Well, I like the idea that they didn't just bestow him with that title in the show, and they had a reason for the Dora Milaje to go, look, you kept back the person who killed our king, so maybe you want to stay clear of us for a while, and maybe you want to earn that title that we gave you when you were there,
Yeah.
I kind of think that makes sense in the show. So, and I thought it was interesting in the documentary when Sebastian Stan was basically saying that this is the story of Sam Wilson, and he's there because he has a connected story with him, but he was very clear that this is about Sam Wilson in the show, and his story is the secondary story of the show. I thought that was quite interesting that Sebastian Stan thought that as well.
Yeah, definitely.
We also got some more feedback from Brandy Anderson last week, just after we'd recorded our finale episode. I know we covered actually a lot of the points that she'd mentioned on her feedback. So there's just a bit of feedback she had on Isaiah Bradley from the episode that I wanted to share. She says, Isaiah Bradley, this storyline was beautiful, and it would have been more than enough if they'd just shown him looking on during Sam's speech. But to have another moment in his backyard with Sam, this time letting Sam know he had what it takes to make a difference, just total icing on the cake. But then to go to the museum and see not only Isaiah memorialized, but also those that he served with. And I don't know if anyone else paused to read it, but it tells the whole background story about the black soldiers being experimented on and how most of them didn't survive the first round. It tells about the POW camp, the decision to blow it, to hide the evidence, and Isaiah going to rescue his men and other soldiers who were captured. And then it goes on to tell about his incarceration and more experiments done on him, and how his family was led to believe that he was dead. But I didn't see anything that mentioned Isaiah was currently still alive. Sam giving this not only to Isaiah, but to his fallen men, his family, the black community, and the entire world, all while respecting Isaiah's wishes to remain dead. Total chef's kiss. I won't lie, I cried the first time I watched it. I cried the second time I watched it. I cried when I went back to read what was written about Isaiah Bradley, and I'm tearing up now just thinking about it. Also on Sharon Carter being the power broker, it was a bit anticlimactic in the series, and now I find myself listening to other people talk and wondering, who is she talking to at the end of the show? Could she not be the power broker? Could it be that she is the power broker, but there's someone else who is still pulling her strings? Could that someone else be Val, maybe? I've also heard someone say that it could be Nick Fury. I don't feel that one as much. But now I'm going to be wondering, am I still looking for Mephisto in this show?
Excellent stuff, Brandy.
Excellent, Brandy.
Yeah, Mephisto is always there as the devil in the Marvel Universe, helping all those baddies be even badder, I guess. I think within the series, I think Sharon Carter, I kind of agree with you. But I think that, the theory of her potentially being Skrull, is really interesting. And the phone call, yes. Is it just buyers? Is it just, that intermediary for her buyers? Or is it Val? Is it Nick Fury? Yeah. It'd be really good to see. And I completely agree with you. The whole, that kind of, passing of the torch by Sam in terms of the history, the acknowledgement of, black soldiers, and the black history, to, the black community and his family, is just so poignant, really important. And, at the same time, respecting Isaiah's wishes to remain, I guess, off grid, and dead, is just really, really good. Yeah. That was so good. And I think having Isaiah's grandchild there as well with him reading it, going through it, that kind of, again, that generational aspect I thought was really important.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Brandy. And, other shows would have absolutely just had that scene of him looking on TV, on the speech, and kind of smiling at the speech, and that's kind of it. But having that extra moment shows how important this is to Sam and his character in the show, and shows how important Isaiah Bradley is to the history of Captain America, effectively. So, some really good points. Thanks so much for that, Brandy.
Yes, thank you so much, Brandy. And I'm glad you feel comfortable enough to tell us that you were tearing up even just talking about it, because I know how important this show was to people. And I'm so glad that these stories can be told now and discussed and in the open. So thank you. We additionally got some feedback from Kelly Resendez, who had this to say: so much to discuss this episode that I wanted to watch a second time before commenting, but couldn't wait. Even before the attack on the GRC, Sam flying into the New York skyline with that blue glow from his new wings got me excited. Loved the new Captain America suit from Sam, the colours, the wings, the resurrection of Red Wing, but I will admit I was a little disappointed that there wasn't a nanotech suit like Black Panther or Iron Man. Loved the fight and aerial sequences here in the first 20 minutes. Glad we ended with that. There were plot holes, but I guess that could be expected with everything going on in the real world. Bucky finally making amends and seeing that weight seemingly lifted from his shoulders at the party was uplifting. Zemo in the raft with the smirk on his face. It was the butler in the car with the detonator. Finally, for now, can Sam and Bucky finally say that they are friends and partners and not just co-workers? After that fight in New York, Bucky gives Cap a pat on the shield, and at the party in Louisiana, Sam puts his hand on Bucky's shoulders as they walk away. So much more to talk about. Can't wait to listen to the podcast. Thank you so much, Kelly. And yeah, I think they are. There was a question. I remember seeing one of the interviews being done during the media, the press junkets. Everyone was asking about what happened to the ice cream cake that Bucky brings in at the end of the party.
Yeah.
And apparently they did not let it go to waste. The child actors at the party devoured it.
Excellent, excellent. I did love that when, everybody's got this massive cookout going on and he just went to a shop and bought an ice cream cake to bring along. Yeah. I love that, pointed out by one of our pieces of feedback last week. Are they friends? Yes, they're friends. Possibly future brother-in-laws. Potentially.
I want that storyline.
Yeah, me too.
There is already quite a lot of fanfic about Sarah and Bucky getting together. I've seen it just on Twitter and threads where people are really looking for Bucky and Sarah to get together. And Val and Nick Fury is the other new one. Wanting to see the replication of Contessa in the comic books and Nick Fury in the comic books being a couple for many, many years. Now seeing Julie Louis-Dreyfus and Samuel L. Jackson get together in a future movie. I think that'd be awesome.
Yeah. That would be pretty magical.
Thanks so much, Kelly, for your feedback. Thanks everybody else for your feedback on the last episode and on the Assemble documentary. One final voicemail from Greg Schwam, who sent the voicemail in just after we'd recorded our finale episode, but I know he had some thoughts about the final episode.
Hey guys, this is Greg. I mean, what can I say about this show? It had that first emotional scene when you see Sam fly into the window with the suit and the shield, and just amazing action sequences. It had Carly, possibly changing and maybe not. And then it had the vindication of John Walker, like, hey, I'm going to actually save people and not just kill people with my shield, that ended up getting battered and bruised. Closure for Bucky. It was just so good. And then that final, don't get me wrong, not monologuing, but the speech that Sam gave on TV, okay, great. But the one that really got me was I think it was intended, but just the emotional impact of taking Isaiah and the new statue. And I was just tears streaking down my face by the end of the show. And then that final splash of the next title card, right after the show, Captain America and the Winter Soldier. I was just like, oh God, chills and more tears. And it was so good. All right. Look forward to the podcast. Bye.
Thanks so much, Greg. Greg also sent an addendum to his voicemail to say, and I didn't even mention a traitor within the mist. The reveal of Sharon as the power broker was actually a little bit underwhelming, but the post-credit scene where she's going to use her new position to betray the country absolutely killed me. Thanks, Greg. So good to hear your feedback, Greg. I know you seem to have enjoyed the show as much as we did.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Yeah. I think Sharon is interesting. As I said, I used my curry metaphor on it. So
You did last week.
I do like the heat and the spice that they've introduced to this character. But yeah, I agree. I think through this series, it was flagged pretty blatantly that she was the power broker.
Yeah. I know in the documentary, Malcolm Spellman says that they didn't want to over-egg the pudding. They didn't want to, like, reveal it too early, and there's you need to get that balance right. I think everybody's pretty clear that this reveal was a little underwhelming because we all knew it but hoped it would be something else, I think was kind of what a lot of people have been saying. I'm absolutely fine with the reveal. I think there's more there, and I think the post-credit scene tells you there's more there coming in the future, but I don't think anybody was shocked that Sharon was the power broker as such. I think there was definitely, it was all there in the show, I think.
Yeah, no, the egg was on the wall. To mix metaphors here.
Oh, once again, Chris.
Yes, because it's fun. Yeah, no, like, I personally think they kind of, they overhyped and underdelivered, but I think when I get into it and the more I have a retrospective view, I'm severely interested about where it's going to go. So
Yeah,
I think it's the possibilities that it has.
Yeah.
I think is where just even from the documentary, I think that's where we're going to, that additional context was like, oh yeah, like they did really mess her up by leaving her be, and like she had to go out on alone, so she's going to change. So the potential of where she will go now that at that end credit is going to be very interesting. Absolutely. I will just close with saying, Greg, you were exactly right. That title card change, which a lot of people missed,
we did.
was just fantastic.
Sadly. Chris called it, and me and Tom for some reason missed it on our watch through. I think we got to the end of the episode, watched the post-credits scene and just skipped back to the start and got excited about that, rather than noticing that. Really silly that we didn't notice that. Thanks so much once again to everybody for your feedback for the show. Speaking of possibilities for the future, I don't know whether you guys looked at your calendar for TV Podcast Industries, but we have, in our diaries for next Saturday, we're recording a podcast about, Black Widow, the movie, which was supposed to be coming out next Saturday, so we're not doing that. Unfortunately, once again, Black Widow moved to later in the year. The next Marvel TV show that we'll be covering is Loki, another show speaking about possibilities, a time-traveling, what would you say? I guess duplicitous character is how everybody describes Loki. Someone that can't really trust what he's going to do. Is he going to mess with every timeline and change all of the Marvel movies? Is he going to be, going on heists throughout history, building his power? Lots of things we don't know about Loki, but very excited to see what they do with the next Marvel show after these two shows, WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Very much so. I think it's going to be as cerebral as WandaVision and as grounded with some kind of, because we know he goes to the 60s or the 70s with DB Cooper. So it's going to be this weird cacophony and mix. So hopefully it all comes together like a great concert.
Yes.
But that finishes off two podcasts at the moment. We just finished our Invincible podcast with the finale, which myself and Chris have been covering, all 8 episodes of that. We finished that this week. Falcon the Winter Soldier, the book is closed for this one. And next up, we're heading to a galaxy far, far away, and staying with animation, we're going to be covering Star Wars The Bad Batch. That show begins on Tuesday, the 4th of May, which is just in a couple of days' time. Not sure exactly what we're going to be covering those first couple of episodes for the show. We're probably going to be releasing them towards the end of next week. There's 2 episodes out next week. The first one is I think 50-minute long opener, and then they'll have regular 20 to 30-minute episodes for the rest of the series, but looking forward to that. We will also be staying in animation this month for MODOK, as mentioned by one of our lovely listeners in their feedback. We will be covering MODOK, which is going to be airing on Star from the end of May. So in Marvel, but not as tied to the canon, let's say, as all of these shows have been. It feels like it's going to be making a lot of jokes at Marvel's expense, which they kind of need now. That'll be a bit of fun.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Yes, and also in what other universe can you get John Hamm as Iron Man, Nathan Fillion as Wonder Man, Simon Williams, and that's just the beginning.
Absolutely.
There are hundreds of cameos, apparently, of just different random characters, and I can't wait.
don't forget Patton Oswalt as the star of the show, as MODOK himself.
I can't.
His second, actually probably his seventh role in the Marvel Universe since he played I think it was quadruplets by the end of it in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So it'd be great to have Patton Oswalt back on screen for that.
Yes.
That's it. That's all the stuff we're going to be covering coming up. Thanks so much for joining us. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast over on tvpodcastindustries.com to get coverage of all of the shows that we're covering. I'm really looking forward to speaking more Marvel with you in the future.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us, and make sure you head on over to patreon.com/tvpodcastindustries to help us keep the lights on. But more importantly, head on over to tvpodcastindustries.com where you subscribe to all of our feeds to make sure you do not miss an episode anytime we put it out.
Yes. Thank you so much, fellow defenders, for joining us on the drive down our digitally enhanced German highway, which is the Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Autobahn, John. Autobahn.
Well, Autobahn, highway, motorway, a road, who knows. But thanks so much for joining us. It's really been great having all the discussion, all the feedback, all the entrance into the pub quiz. It's really good getting all your thoughts on these fabulous shows. So yeah, thanks so much. And we will be back soon in a galaxy far, far away. Woohoo! And just remember, keep watching, keep listening, and keep defending.
Bye.
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 I hear a lot of people saying the blues, but I'm gonna tell you what the blues is. When you ain't got no money, you got the blues.